There was a moment in my garden I'll never forget. I pushed my trowel into the soil, expecting the same dusty, compacted texture I'd gotten used to. Instead, the earth gave way easily, rich, dark, almost spongy. When I pulled up a handful, I saw something I hadn't seen in months: worms. Dozens of them, twisting and thriving in a bed that had once been lifeless. And the smell, earthy, like a forest floor after rain. It didn't just look alive, it felt alive. The secret? A forgotten Amish fertilizer almost no one talks about anymore. It's not sold in stores, it's not trendy, but it might be the most powerful thing I've ever put in my soil. And once I show you what it is, and how it works, you might never compost the same way again. This isn't some miracle product, it's an old-world blend, passed down quietly among Amish farmers, built from materials they had on hand, things we often discard today. When used properly, it doesn't just feed your plants, it wakes up the underground web of life that feeds your plants for you. If your soil is tired, if your beds are dead, this might be the shortcut you've been searching for. The ancient formula that doesn't come in a bag. The Amish have long understood that real soil fertility isn't about quick fixes, it's about feeding the soil ecosystem from the bottom up. The formula I learned involved just two simple ingredients: fermented manure and fine wood ash. But the way they're combined, stored, and applied makes all the difference. This is not the raw manure you might toss into a pile and hope breaks down. This is fermented, sun-aged, and sometimes buried manure, left to sit in covered pits or barrels until it loses its harsh ammonia bite and transforms into a dark, crumbly substance crawling with microbial life. The wood ash? It's not dumped in fresh. It's sifted, aged, and then mixed slowly, often with a splash of whey or diluted milk, to buffer its alkalinity and activate certain beneficial compounds. Together they form a kind of microbial starter, not just nutrient-rich but biologically electric. When buried 6 to 8 inches deep, this mix doesn't just feed your plants, it reprograms your soil, it changes the fungal to bacterial balance, it neutralizes acidity, it adds trace minerals we've stripped out with overwatering and synthetic fertilizers. And most importantly, it builds something that chemical NPK never will: humus. How this buried mix revives dead soil is quite fascinating. When you tuck this fermented Amish blend deep into your bed, something incredible happens. You're not just feeding the top layer like most compost teas or foliar sprays, you're igniting life from below, and honestly, that matters more than most gardeners realize. Beneath the surface, there's a whole network of fungal threads, root hairs, bacterial colonies, and soil microfauna that really determine how fertile your garden is. Most modern methods focus on surface-level feeding, top dressing, mulching, watering with fish emulsion. But if the lower layers are compacted, dry, or biologically sterile, roots just can't thrive. What the Amish fertilizer does is create a core zone of microbial heat and nutrient transformation, an underground zone where decomposition is active but controlled. The fermented manure provides slow-release nitrogen, phosphorus, and carbon. The wood ash contributes potassium, calcium, and a wealth of micronutrients like magnesium and zinc. But the magic is in how they break down together. The ash, when buffered properly, keeps the microbial pH in balance. The fermented manure keeps it alive. Within weeks of burial, you'll find worm tunnels forming directly toward this buried core. The soil becomes looser, air pockets appear, and roots begin growing toward the buried pocket, sensing it's a zone of higher fertility. How to make and use this forgotten fertilizer at home is simpler than you might think. You don't need to be Amish to make it, but you do need to follow their rhythm. Start by collecting well-aged manure, cow, goat, rabbit, or even poultry, but it must be aged. If it still smells strongly of ammonia or is too wet, let it sit in a covered bin or barrel for at least 4 to 6 weeks. You want it damp, dark, and earthy smelling. If you can stir it with a stick and it clumps like compost, you're on the right track. Next, gather clean hardwood ash. Avoid ash from treated wood, charcoal briquettes, or anything chemically processed. Sift it if needed to remove nails or lumps. Let it sit in a dry, protected place for a week. This softens its caustic bite. Alright, so start by mixing your aged manure and ash in a 4-to-1 ratio. That's 4 parts manure to 1 part ash. If you want, you can splash in just a little bit of diluted whey, kefir water, or raw milk. This brings in lactic acid bacteria, and helps keep the alkalinity in check. Once you've got it all combined, let it sit for a few more days in a shaded spot, just long enough for everything to bond and activate. When you're ready to apply, dig trenches or small pits about 6 to 8 inches deep in your raised bed. Bury handfuls of the mix, spacing them roughly a foot apart. Then, just cover it all up with your native soil and mulch like you usually do. Within about 2 weeks you'll notice a difference. The soil's gonna feel warmer to the touch, it'll hang on to moisture a lot longer, your mulch will break down faster, and your plants, especially those root crops, will start showing more vigorous, upright growth. Why does this method work when others just, well, don't? This buried amendment doesn't wash away in heavy rains, it doesn't evaporate or get burned off in the sun, it stays deep, quiet, and constant, working around the clock to nourish the living web below your plants. You know, a lot of gardeners add compost to the top of their soil, and honestly they see little change. That's because surface amendments feed surface microbes, but your roots don't live at the surface. This old Amish method works from the inside out, not the outside in. It actually mimics what forests do naturally: leaves fall, get buried over time, and slowly release fertility from within the soil structure. It's really nature's way of banking nutrients, and now it's your secret too. The long-term benefits here, it's not just about fertility, it's about resilience. Beds treated with this buried fertilizer don't just grow better, they handle stress better. Droughts take longer to wilt your plants. Pests, well, they seem to avoid the stronger, healthier foliage. Fungal diseases, they're less common. And each season, the soil becomes richer, more workable, and more alive. Over time, you might not even need to add this mix every season. Just once every 12 to 18 months can be enough to keep that microbial engine running. Some gardeners even use it to revive compacted lawns or failed compost piles. It's a tool you'll come back to again and again. If your soil feels tired, don't give up on it. Don't dig it all out. Don't drown it in commercial fertilizers. Bury this. Give your soil something real. Something alive. Something old and powerful that worked long before we had garden centers or synthetic sprays. If you found this guide helpful, tap that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our regenerative gardening secrets. Share it with a friend who's struggling with dead soil. Let's bring our beds back to life, one forgotten method at a time. Hydrohaven is where soil gets its soul back. See you in the next one.